Your soulmate saying, "Please open this. Before I make the biggest mistake of my life." Something slipped through the silence tonight, not a message, not a call, but a single thought that refused to disappear. It arrived with the feeling that somewhere, someone had reached a crossroads they never believed they would face. They stared at a screen for what felt like forever, typing a few words, deleting them, starting again. Their hands hesitated. Their heart didn't. And just before they convinced themselves to walk away without saying anything, one sentence finally remained: "Please open this, before I make the biggest mistake of my life." That wasn't written to create drama. It was written because they had reached the last moment where honesty still had a chance to change everything. But what pushed them this far? Why now? And what truth have they been carrying that suddenly became too heavy to hide? Stay with this, because the smallest detail has already begun revealing an answer that almost nobody notices the first time. Earlier that day, everything appeared completely ordinary. People smiled. Conversations came and went. Life moved at its usual pace. Yet behind one quiet expression, an invisible battle was unfolding. Your soulmate had spent countless days convincing themselves that silence was the safest choice. They believed protecting their feelings meant protecting both of you. But something unexpected happened. A casual conversation, an old photograph, a familiar place. No one could say exactly which moment caused it, only that one ordinary second unlocked memories they thought were buried forever. Suddenly every reason for staying quiet started falling apart. They realized that avoiding one difficult conversation might create a lifetime of unanswered questions instead. Have you ever noticed how a single decision can quietly reshape an entire future before anyone else even realizes it? That realization settled over them like the final page of a story they weren't ready to finish. They walked through crowded streets while hearing almost nothing around them. Every passing face reminded them how quickly opportunities disappear when fear speaks louder than hope. And somewhere between one deep breath and the next, they whispered something they had never admitted before: "If I don't tell them now, I may lose the chance forever. Don't look away yet." The next moment begins uncovering why those words carried far more weight than they seemed. As the evening grew quieter, they found themselves sitting alone beneath soft city lights, watching reflections shimmer across the pavement after a brief summer rain. The world kept moving, yet time around them felt strangely frozen. They opened old conversations, reread forgotten messages, smiled at memories they had pretended no longer mattered, and finally understood something that had been chasing them for longer than they realized. The greatest mistake wasn't falling in love. It wasn't waiting. It wasn't even the distance that had separated two paths. The greatest mistake would be allowing fear to write the ending before truth ever had the chance to speak. So they began writing what could become the most important message of their life. Every sentence felt like opening a locked door. Every pause carried another unspoken confession. But halfway through, their fingers stopped above the screen. Someone else's opinion echoed in their mind. A doubt returned. One final hesitation stood between courage and regret. Then something completely unexpected appeared, something that made them freeze before pressing send. And when they saw it, everything they thought they were about to do suddenly changed. Just as their thumb drifted toward the send button, the screen lit up with something they hadn't expected to see. It wasn't the message they were writing. It wasn't a notification they had been waiting for. It was a memory from years ago, a simple photo that appeared at exactly the wrong, or perhaps the perfect, moment. They stared at it without blinking. 2 smiles. One unforgettable afternoon. A promise that had never been spoken out loud but somehow had always existed between the lines. For several long seconds, they couldn't move. Was this coincidence? Or was life quietly reminding them what they were about to lose? Keep watching, because one overlooked choice in the next few moments begins revealing what has truly been happening inside their heart. Instead of sending the message immediately, they closed their eyes and imagined 2 completely different futures. In one, they stayed silent. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Life continued, but every success felt strangely incomplete because one question never stopped following them: what if I had simply told the truth? In the other future, they pressed send. Maybe the answer would arrive quickly. Maybe it would take time. Maybe it would surprise them entirely. But at least they would know they had chosen courage instead of regret. That thought changed something deep inside them. They realized that people rarely regret honest words spoken with kindness. They regret the conversations they never allowed to happen. And suddenly, the message they had been rewriting all evening became shorter instead of longer. It no longer needed perfect sentences. It only needed genuine ones. If this story has touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like to follow more stories like this, subscribing helps you stay connected for what comes next. Because the next few minutes uncover a detail that completely reshapes the reason behind those opening words. Then came the moment no one else could see. They read the message one final time. Please open this, before I make the biggest mistake of my life. Their breathing slowed. The room was silent enough to hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the distance. Every distraction disappeared. This wasn't about chasing someone. It wasn't about forcing an ending or demanding an answer. It was about refusing to let fear become the author of their story. They smiled gently, almost as if they had finally forgiven themselves for waiting so long. Their thumb hovered over the screen once again, and this time it didn't hesitate. The message was ready. Their heart was ready. But just before they pressed send, another notification quietly appeared at the top of the display. It carried only a few unexpected words, yet those words changed the entire meaning of everything they had been preparing to say. And in that single breathtaking instant, they realized they weren't the only one trying to find the courage to speak first. A quiet vibration interrupted the stillness before the message could leave their hands. They almost ignored it, believing it was just another ordinary notification. But something about it felt different. Their eyes locked onto the screen. Their heartbeat slowed instead of racing. It wasn't a dramatic announcement or a long paragraph. It was a simple reminder of a conversation that had never truly ended. In that instant, they understood something remarkable. Sometimes life doesn't stop us because we're on the wrong path. Sometimes it pauses us because one missing piece is about to appear. Stay with this, because the next discovery uncovers why your soulmate suddenly believed this wasn't just another ordinary night. They leaned back and allowed themselves to remember every small moment they had dismissed over the years. The conversations that ended too soon. The smiles that lasted a little longer than expected. The quiet glances that neither of you ever explained. None of those memories had disappeared. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to make sense together. Suddenly, what once looked like random events began fitting together like pieces of a picture hidden in plain sight. Your soulmate realized they had spent far too much time searching for perfect timing, when what truly mattered was genuine intention. They whispered softly, almost laughing at themselves, "I've been waiting for certainty, but certainty was never coming." That realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. Fear began losing its grip, not because every answer had appeared, but because they finally accepted that some of life's most meaningful chapters begin before every question is answered. Look a little closer. One subtle decision in the next few moments changes everything in a way neither of you could have predicted. With a calm they hadn't felt in a very long time, they opened the message once more. This time they removed every sentence that sounded like an apology for having feelings. They erased every attempt to sound perfect. What remained was honest. Simple. Real. The words carried no pressure, only sincerity. It was the kind of message that doesn't ask someone to change the future, it simply opens the door for the future to reveal itself. Their finger rested above the send button once again, but before touching it, they smiled at one final thought. If this reaches them, they whispered, they'll finally know the truth I've carried for far too long. Outside, the first light of a new morning quietly began touching the horizon. It felt less like the end of a long night and more like the beginning of something neither of you had expected. Then, with one steady breath, they finally pressed send. The message disappeared from the screen. And almost immediately, 3 tiny dots appeared, showing that someone on the other side had already begun typing a reply. But what those first few words revealed would completely transform everything your soulmate believed was about to happen next. Before the next reply appeared, there was one brief moment when time seemed to stand completely still. Your soulmate didn't blink. They didn't breathe as deeply as before. They simply watched those 3 tiny dots appear, disappear, and appear again. It wasn't hesitation anymore. It felt like someone on the other side was searching for the exact words that could change 2 lives at once. Every passing second stretched longer than the last. And strangely, the waiting itself began answering questions neither of you had been able to answer for so long. Don't leave just yet, because what happened in the next few moments revealed something far more meaningful than either person expected. The reply finally arrived, but it wasn't what your soulmate had prepared themselves to read. There was no blame. No cold distance. No attempt to reopen old misunderstandings. Instead, the very first sentence made them stop reading for several seconds. It simply said, "I thought I was the only one who still felt this way." Those few words dissolved months of silent assumptions in an instant. Suddenly, every moment of doubt looked completely different. Both hearts had been protecting themselves at the exact same time, believing the other had already moved on. They realized that silence had been creating stories that were never true in the first place. Your soulmate smiled, not because every problem had disappeared, but because honesty had finally entered the conversation. If this story has stayed with you until now, thank you for sharing this journey. Feel free to leave a comment about the moment that resonated most with you, and if you enjoy stories like these, subscribing helps you catch the next chapter when it arrives. But don't look away yet, because one final detail in this exchange quietly changes the entire direction of the story. As they continued reading, another message appeared almost immediately afterward. Can we stop letting fear make our decisions? Your soulmate closed their eyes and let those words settle into their heart. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't imagining the future through worry. They were seeing it through possibility. The biggest mistake they had feared making was never sending that message at all. Yet the greatest surprise wasn't the reply, it was discovering that courage has a remarkable way of inviting courage back. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, filling the room with warm light that seemed to erase the heaviness of the night before. They gently set the phone down, knowing this conversation had only just begun. But then something unexpected caught their attention. A new message arrived from someone they hadn't heard from in a very long time, someone connected to a chapter both of you believed had already been closed forever. The name on the screen brought back memories neither of you saw coming, and whatever came next would test this newfound hope in a way no one could have predicted. The name glowing on the screen didn't bring fear. It brought questions. Your soulmate stared at it for several silent seconds, trying to understand why this person had chosen today, of all days, to reach out. The timing felt almost impossible. Just moments after finally finding the courage to speak honestly, the past had quietly knocked on the door once again. They considered ignoring it. After all, they had already made the decision that mattered most. But something deep inside whispered that unfinished stories have a way of asking for one last conversation before they truly fade away. So, with steady hands and a calm heart, they opened the message. What they found wasn't an argument, an apology, or an attempt to pull them backward. It was something much simpler, and somehow much more surprising. I just wanted to tell you, the message began, you were right to follow your heart. Those words landed with unexpected weight. Stay with this, because the next realization explains why this moment became the final piece of a puzzle that had been forming for far longer than anyone realized. Your soulmate leaned back and let the silence settle around them. They suddenly understood that life had been offering quiet lessons all along. Every delay had taught patience. Every unanswered question had built resilience. Every uncertain step had prepared them for this exact moment. The moment when they would finally stop asking everyone else what they should do and start listening to what they already knew deep inside. The approval they had been searching for had never truly belonged to other people. It had been waiting within them. That realization changed everything. The fear of making the biggest mistake dissolved because they finally understood what the real mistake would have been, allowing doubt to keep writing chapters that no longer belonged in their story. Looking out the window, they noticed the world beginning another ordinary day. Cars passed. Birds crossed the bright morning sky. People hurried toward places they needed to be. Yet for your soulmate, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The world looked exactly the same, but they had changed. It came from the same person who had received the heartfelt confession earlier. It simply read, "I'm glad you didn't stay silent." Your soulmate smiled in a way they hadn't smiled for a very long time. Not because every answer had arrived, and not because the future had suddenly become predictable. They smiled because they finally realized that the greatest turning points in life rarely begin with grand speeches. They begin with one honest sentence spoken at the right time. They quietly placed the phone in their pocket and took a slow breath, ready to step into whatever tomorrow would bring. But just as they turned to leave, they noticed something folded neatly beside the front door, an envelope with no stamp, no return address, and only 4 handwritten words across the front, "For the future together." Your soulmate froze. They knew they had never seen it before. Yet somehow, it already felt deeply personal. And the moment they reached out to open it, they realized this story still had one extraordinary chapter waiting to be revealed. The envelope felt unusually light, yet somehow it carried more weight than anything your soulmate had held in years. They turned it over slowly, searching for a clue that wasn't there. No signature. No date. No explanation. Just 4 carefully written words that seemed to know exactly where this journey was heading, for the future together. A gentle breeze slipped through the open window, lifting one corner of the envelope as if encouraging them to stop wondering and finally discover what had been waiting inside. Their fingers paused for one last heartbeat before breaking the seal. Keep following this moment, because what they unfolded wasn't simply a letter, it became a mirror reflecting everything they had almost walked away from. Inside was a single sheet of paper, surprisingly plain, with handwriting that looked calm and deliberate. The first line didn't try to impress anyone. It simply read, "If you're reading this, it means you finally chose honesty over fear." Your soulmate looked around the room, almost expecting someone to step forward and explain how such words could feel so personal. The note continued, not by predicting the future, but by reminding them of something easy to forget. Every meaningful connection reaches a moment when someone must decide whether silence is safer than truth. Most people choose silence. Very few choose courage. As they continued reading, each sentence felt less like advice and more like recognition, as though someone had quietly understood every doubt they had carried without ever hearing them spoken aloud. Then came a line that stayed with them longer than any other. "The life you were afraid of losing only begins when you stop running from the conversation that matters most." They lowered the page and smiled, not because every uncertainty had disappeared, but because the uncertainty no longer frightened them. It had become part of the adventure instead of an obstacle. Before this chapter ends, notice one small detail that almost everyone would overlook. As they folded the letter and slipped it carefully back into the envelope, another soft notification appeared on the phone. It was the reply they had secretly hoped for but never expected to receive so quickly. "Would you like to meet and talk?" There was no pressure in those words. No urgency. Just a genuine invitation to begin again with openness instead of assumptions. Your soulmate looked out toward the afternoon sunlight, realizing how different the world felt from the one they had woken up to only hours earlier. The biggest mistake of their life had never been waiting too long or loving too deeply. It would have been believing that one moment of fear deserved the final word. Instead, they had chosen courage, and that single choice quietly transformed everything that followed. With a peaceful breath, they picked up the phone, smiled, and typed one simple answer, yes. But as soon as the message was sent, another unexpected surprise appeared on the screen, a photograph attached to the conversation, captured long before either of you realized how connected your stories truly were. And hidden inside that photograph was one final clue that neither of you had ever noticed until now.